Hello, I'm Ed Gallagher, President of the American Scandinavian Foundation and Scandinavia House, and I'm delighted to welcome you to Scandinavia House Online for this discussion of the film Aalto by the director Virpi Suutari and Peter Reed, curator of the Museum of Modern Art exhibition on Alvar Aalto in 1998. This discussion complements the showing of Aalto by Scandinavia House Online from April 9 to 15. The screening and discussion are one of many programs presented by the American Scandinavian Foundation at Scandinavia House Online. For further information on all programs, consult scandinaviahouse.org. I'm very pleased to welcome our two guests, each with an extensive knowledge of the life and work of Alvar Aalto. Virpi Suutari has directed films for over 25 years and is internationally recognized for her powerful narrative style. Her films have been nominated for countless awards, and she received the Finnish National Film Award, the UC, for Best Documentary 3 times. Peter Reed, until recently, was a Senior Deputy Director for Cultural Affairs at the Museum of Modern Art. There, in 1998, he organized a landmark exhibition, Alvar Aalto, Between Humanism and Materialism. He holds a PhD in art history from the University of Pennsylvania, where he also served as Director of Research at the Architectural Archives. Welcome, Virpi and Peter.
Thank you, Ed. Virpi, hello. Great to see you from here in New York. And you're in Helsinki?
I'm in Helsinki right now, yes.
Great, great. Well, congratulations on this extraordinary film. It's such a beautiful, unique film. And I've been dying to see it. I know you've been working on it for some time, but it's really I think you've so captured what it means for architecture to be an art, that it's not just, it's not just building, it's not just technology, there's architecture is an incredibly creative act. And I think, in the broadest sense, you portray that so beautifully. And I know you've been working on this film for quite some time, but maybe before we launch into too much discussion, what's it like to release a film, to complete a film in a time during this pandemic? Because you finished the film in last summer, 2020 or so?
Yeah, the film was completed last spring. And as you said, it was quite a challenge to release a film during these very challenging times, but nevertheless, we wanted to release it in Finland in cinemas last fall, and luckily, between September and November, there was a sort of easier time here in Finland with the pandemic, and we were able to release it and distribute it in cinemas, and we got really good audiences. So we were lucky in that sense. And even though most of the festivals have went online or so, the film has traveled really well during these past months. It has been in different festivals and it has been brought to different countries. I think about 20 countries have bought the film, and some of them have already showed it, but it's still waiting for cinema releases. For example, I think in Japan, in Switzerland, it's been released in cinemas in Australia, in Melbourne. It's also been seen in different museums at the Barbican Centre in London, and it will be in Hong Kong Modern Museum and so on. So I'm quite happy, even though the times have been tough.
Yeah, well, maybe that's a bit of the silver lining in the pandemic, is that everything did go online, which has given us a chance, or as you said, people all over the world to see this film, and perhaps we might not have otherwise. And so it's great that, for a week, we here in New York with American Scandinavian Foundation get to enjoy this film. But, you mentioned it's being seen all over the world. I mean, you picked a subject, Alvar Aalto, internationally renowned, one of the most famous people from Finland, who happens to be an architect. How did you decide to make a film on Aalto? What were you thinking?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it's sort of a very crazy project to try to make a film about an iconic person and iconic buildings, what he did and what his atelier designed. I guess I have been preparing myself to make this film from my childhood, because I grew up in northern part of Finland, in a small town called Rovaniemi, which is by the Arctic Circle. And Aalto was sort of a hero of my childhood town, because he was one of the architects who came in rescue after the Second World War, rebuilding the town. Well, I was a child in the late 60s and in the 70s, and Aalto office completed a beautiful library in my hometown in 1965. And I often went there after school, and it was sort of the most important place beside my home for me. I went there really, really often, and even as a child, I realized that I was in a very special, beautiful place with the right kind of scale for a human being to be in. And I think that experience has left a very strong mark in me. And I guess that I've been dreaming about this film for a very long time, but now that I'm over 50, I was mature enough to make this film independently, because in Finland every Finn has an opinion about Aalto. Some people absolutely hate everything he did, and some people really see him as an iconic superstar in a way. And I had to be independent and to make my own way and my own point of view to his personality and to the buildings and design objects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even I think it shows in the film, his boat was called, Nemo Propheta in Patria, right? No man is a prophet in his own land. And I think Aalto had that reputation during his lifetime that you described. He was both, very revered, and also people were not so happy sometimes with him. So you can't win, but of course, he had this amazing international.
Yeah. And almost every Finn has some Aalto object in their house, whether it's an Aalto vase or some drinking glasses that Aino Aalto, his first wife, designed. So we all think that we know everything about Aaltos, but I realized also that we don't know actually so much. We just think that we know, and it was really interesting to try to find out who was he as a human being, as a contradictory human being. And for me also, who were the two architect wives, Aino Aalto and Elisa Aalto? What kind of role did they play in the Aalto story and in creating the Aalto grammar, the Aalto language that we so well know nowadays? So these were the things. Of course, I wanted to see really behind the scenes, behind this hero image that we had about him.
Well, I think I love what you described about the Rovaniemi Library, because that experience, his work is not like other architects, right? So that sense, that goal he had of making a kind of earthly paradise that buildings would inspire, it worked, you could say. I mean, they are incredibly beautiful, distinctive buildings. And I think as I step back and think about the film you made, what it strikes me is you've made a portrait of buildings. I mean, you might say, you put architecture on film, But I also love what you said about Aino and Alyssa, because this is very much a portrait of a marriage and of a collaboration, right? And I think that's what was so refreshing and unusual for me, even the way you begin the film. Now I'm drawing a sudden blank. I know he's drawing, but it's like a love letter to Aino,
Yes.
right? And it tells you right away, this is going to be a story, a very human story about what it means to be in a marriage that they're both architects. You know, this really comes across, and I think this is new, right? This is not a story that we have really seen before very much. Tell us about that. How did you find all that material and the intimacy that you were trying to portray? It really comes across.
Yeah, it was really important for me from the beginning that I'm not making, because I'm not an architect, I didn't want to make just a cool academic study about Aalto's architecture. I wanted to portray the buildings and the design objects, but I also wanted to portray the human beings. And as you said, it is also for Finns, it is quite new to put more emphasis on Aino's role and to tell that story, how symbiotically they worked and collaborated together and how equally they collaborated. We have forgotten Aino's role a bit over the decades, but I don't think it's Alvar Aalto to be blamed for that, because he always treated Aino as a really important equal, and it has been said that Aino was the one whose opinions Alvar Aalto really looked highly of. She was the one, he wouldn't take advices from anyone else but Aino. So he really trusted Aino's sense of style and aesthetics and so on. And for me, the decisive moment making this film or starting to believe in this project was when I got permission from Aalto family to get access to the love letters and to get the permission to use them in the film, the love letters between Aino and Alvar. Because Aino died already in 1949, and there aren't so much, or there isn't so much material about her. We don't know how her voice sounded like, for example, because there are no records of that. So through the letters, I could really learn about who she was. Of course, that's also one truth. We don't really know who she was, but I can at least get some sort of concrete material and how was the dynamics in their relationship, work-wise and also in a more intimate level. So those letters were really, really, really important for this project. Otherwise, I think it would have lacked the soul of this film. It was very, very important.
When, I mean, there's so many aspects to it. I mean, there's what I would call his Dionysian aspect. He's out there, he's an extrovert and enjoying life. And you feel she's very much a part of the office and the work and so forth, but very much a kind of solid rock, holding everything together. But also, I think what it gets I found really moving was how he acknowledges the role she plays in the confidence that she gives to him, the confidence that she builds in him to do what they want to do together. And I think that is also very much what I meant by, you've made a film about an artist, because I think an artist is always questioning his or her work or design. Is it good enough? Have I done enough? and that sense of we can do it together. I love how you did it. I found it very moving. And it reminds me, just for a moment, to say this is interesting to me as an architectural historian coming out now, because I think people are interested in this creative process, and particularly that what's really going on behind that individual, usually a man. And in the United States, there's been, for example, a lot of recent work, publications and film about the architect Louis Kahn, who had very important relationships with women, who provided this kind of both intellectual ideas and creative ideas, but that conviction, that power to believe in yourself. And it is coming across in letters. You know, we have to find this because it's been so hidden.
Yeah, and it was very important to discover how Aino and Alvar sort of developed together. They were young architects when they started working together. They had, of course, children, but they were also researching and finding the whole, discovering the whole new modern world, the winds of modernism in Central Europe, getting to know all the central figures like Le Corbusier and Gropius from Bauhaus and so on. And they were sort of discovering and developing together the shape language, the design language, and the grammatic language. So they were there together, side by side.
And you have a very long career that you have to cover, because unlike some architects, Aalto was, you might say, famous. Aalto was well known from an early age. He had early success, right? He's still in his 30s. Or he's 40 years old when he has a one-man show at the Museum of Modern Art. I mean, this is extraordinary how young and successful he is. So you have a very long story to tell. But I love how you wove in that to be a very modern architect, but he brings a kind of human face to modernism or technology, and the social responsibility, that sense of kind of a utopian social responsibility that the architect has to think about, not just technology, not just modernism, but to be modern is to be socially responsible. And I think that comes across so well in the film.
Yeah. And it has been said that it was especially Aino who had that sort of social, very deep social responsibility in her. And that's also one reason why Alvar Aalto needed Aino, because Aino was reminding him that how important it is.
Yeah, and certainly, one way, I mean, it comes across in many respects from designing everything for the building, the glassware, the furniture, all, the totality. But also, I love the fact you focus also on Finnish industry and housing. It takes a great client too. And I think, the Gulliksons and the Ahlstrom company, that comes across. I mean, Aalto was, sure, he had international success, but he was played such an important role in designing Finland's modernization, right? If Finland was basically an agrarian country, it was modernizing through industry and housing, because if people weren't happy, it would be hard for this new country to survive.
Right. And that's also, my hometown is one great example of that, what the architects did there after the war. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
But that was great, because sometimes people overlook that aspect for the more well-known cultural buildings, they overlook the housing and the industry, and to look at the town halls and the concert halls, which are glorious.
Yeah. But I think the library, Finland is very well known of its libraries, And I really loved in my hometown that Rovaniemi library for the reason also that I felt, I was coming from a quite modest home, but then there was this luxurious library with the brass lamps and leather chairs, and the space itself, of course, it was beautiful. And it belonged to me also. It belonged to everyone. So there was this social aspect and this aspect of equality in almost in all projects that they had. Yeah. Of course, they designed private houses and banks also, but mostly it was for everyone.
Something I wanted to ask you about in making this film is, so we said, you know, architecture is also your subject, a portrait of the buildings. It's the portrait of Aino and Alvar and Alyssa, but it's also the portrait of the buildings. And there are many times when the narration stops, the words stop, and the camera is looking at the buildings. And you mentioned brass a minute ago, and that reminded me that there's a lot of distinct music in this film, and that music plays a role. And I love the way you juxtaposed architecture and space and light with music and sound and so forth. Tell us a little bit about the film score and the role. How did you work with Sanna Salman-Kallio, and I mean, a great composer? Tell us about that, because I think this is also very unique.
Yeah, well, the music always plays a very important role in my filmmaking. And in this case, especially because it's quite a challenge to make a film about buildings, which are not alive, you know, yeah. and design objects, and your protagonists are long time ago, they are dead. so there is a challenge how to make the film, you know, alive and flowing and vibrant. So in this case, the music and the soundscape and the sound score, it comes to rescue in a way, to make it more alive and to take the dust away from the old archive materials. And it's challenging for the cinematographer to work with architecture, because sometimes when you have a shooting day, maybe there isn't a beautiful light or something, and how to capture something to a picture that is supposed to be, you know, experienced. Because Aalto's buildings are always very sensuous. They are very sensual and they are very tactile, how the materials have been used and so on. So they are supposed to be experienced, that you walk through the building and you feel it. And I think this is more true in Aalto's architecture than for some other architects. Some contemporary architects make buildings that are supposed to be only looked at in a way, like it's a sculpture. But Aalto's buildings are always more sensuous, I think, that you walk through and you find something that, or you discover something that you didn't realize at the first sight. So how to bring this to a film? There was a big challenge, and here comes the music, of course, and the soundscape. And I worked with Sanna for many films, and we often start the musical planning in a way that I have some instruments in my head that I want to use. I don't know why they start to sing in my head, but in this case, it was the piano and the drums and the flute. And then Sanna came in and she knew that I want to have these instruments, and she brought some other instruments like the brass and the horns and so on. And we didn't want to make too epoch or historically tied music, because of course this is from different historical periods, but we didn't want to start coloring a certain historical periods, not with music or not with the sound design, but we wanted to be more timeless, as I think Aalto's architecture at its best is it's timeless and it's organic. And for the sound designer, I talked a lot about this organic feeling that we want to have in the film. And we also let us play a little bit with the sounds, like the Foley artist, for example, did some avant-gardist experiments in his studio. He was playing alto vase with the bow.
Oh, like a glass harmonica?
Yes, and he was also clapping some pieces of marble and pieces of some different wood together, and then he was recording that reflection of that sound and bringing it to the sound designer. So we were playing also with the sounds and with the music, and there were some fantastic jazz musicians in the studio, and they were just watching some scenes that we already edited, and they were playing live to the images. So we had a lot of different kind of playfulness and experimenting.
Well, I think it really succeeded in its originality, and I think that was such a brilliant decision not to ask Sibelius or Beethoven or jazz from the 20s to do the work, but to think freshly and, new, so that we didn't come with baggage. I thought that was quite brilliant, and I love the music. So.
Oh, I'm really I'm happy to hear that, and I must say that finding the right tone for the musical score wasn't that easy. We had to work quite a lot for it, so it wasn't like self-evident how to solve this problem.
I can imagine. So there's so much we could be talking about. I know we're beginning to run out of time, I think, but I mean, again, you've got it's a major film, a long film. I mean, it's a full-length documentary and covers so much ground. We could talk about his international career. We could be talking about all kinds of things, but I see Ed has joined us again.
Yes.
Ed, thank you for this opportunity to talk to Virpi. It's really interesting.
Maybe Peter, you could say just a few words about the MoMA's role of bringing the Aaltos to United States. MoMA had a significent role in there.
Sure. Ed, if you'll indulge for 1 second.
By all means.
Sure. I mean, as we started to talk about Aalto's young career as a young man, and his work was shown in the first architecture show at MoMA in 1932 that Philip Johnson and Henry Russell Hitchcock curated, the modern exhibition, international show. And then in 1938, to do the first monographic show on Aalto with a publication. And Virpi covers this story pretty much in the movie, but it is extraordinary how, I think what's important here is this is where you see Aalto on the international stage. This is where you see this charismatic man, which I think is important to bring across, right? I think artists, architects who are particularly successful and prolific have an ability to get people excited about the work. And they have to be able to, seduce, you might say. But, and the other thing, I mean, the 1939 World's Fair, I mean, it just is such an extraordinary building. And I love the fact that, Aalto and Aino entered that competition and won first place, second place, and third place, guaranteeing them a chance they will be shown at the New York World's Fair. Anyway, there's a lot we could talk about, but this is.
Yes, I'm sorry to cut you off, but it's been a wonderful discussion. And Peter, you did follow that 1938 exhibition with your own exhibition in 1998, which we all remember very, very warmly. It was a terrific.
Great. I even have a souvenir from it, one of the blue tiles. We built a
I have one of those as well.
Yeah, I had to bring it out. I love the blue tile.
I always loved those blue tiles as a child. I always ran my fingers, you know, on them.
It's so sensual, so textural. Yeah.
Well, thank you both for a most illuminating discussion, and Virpi for a beautiful film. It's really a wonderful combination of the very personal, but also an aesthetic appreciation and a great historical piece. So thank you so much. Wonderful to bring in the role of Aina in the way that you did. And Peter, thank you so much for being with us and your wonderful observations and moderation. It's been a
well, thank you for the invitation, and it was great fun to speak with Virpi and to see you, Ed. So, and thank you to ASF for showing the film.
Well, we're delighted, and the film will be on view from the 9th to the 15th, and it is being shown with another film, an Estonian documentary, Fred Jussi, The Beauty of Being. So I trust everyone will have a chance to see that, and other programs are available all the time. Just check scandinaviahouse.org for the full offerings of Scandinavia House Online. Thank you, Virpi. Thank you, Peter. And thank you all for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.